Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Safranis, and today we're on with Maxim Gubarev. Maxim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hello, my name is Maxim. First of all, thank you, Alex, for inviting me to this podcast. I'm very happy to be here today. Just a little bit about myself. I'm currently a college student as well as an aspiring entrepreneur. My overall career goal is to work on my business and launch my own projects. And I have been working in the digital field since grade 9 of high school. So I started quite early. At that time, I got a strong desire to gain some practical experience, also build my resume and earn some pocket money as a bonus. And at that time, many of my friends went down the classic path, some summer jobs with some typical examples, including cafes, waiters, and baristas. But for myself, I also almost went down the same direction. And I was even researching similar options. I was considering to work at a pizza place or become a supervisor at a summer camp. But luckily, I was able to deviate from that direction in time. And with that being said, my first job came from a digital space. That was back in grade 9 of high school. I got the opportunity to work with a Germany based newspaper as a journalist. So I started in a journalism space and shifted towards marketing from that. I began writing long form content and then I transitioned to writing short form content, more like the news articles for the newspaper. I worked for them for more than a year, combining that with school. I wrote precisely 641 articles for the newspaper throughout that year and learned a lot during that experience. I was working with tools such as Google Trends, WordPress, and other useful skills, for example, copywriting, search engine optimization, and other good qualities for my marketing career. 3 months before I finished working with the newspaper, I could sense that the project might have some financial difficulties coming up. And at that time, I already knew that the partnership will come to an end quite soon. So at the end of grade 10, it was the start of the summer holidays, and I was still working in the newspaper, but began looking for some side projects. And here I focused on part time tasks and service based openings, possibly working with smaller companies and startups. And during the summer vacation, I had more time on my hands. Of course, there was no schoolwork, so I was able to take those projects on and combine them with the newspaper. This was my work style from June to September of 2022, where I combined side work with newspaper activities. And in September of 2022, which was the beginning of grade 11 of high school for me, my partnership with the newspaper has ended. But in the same month, I was able to find a fully remote job in an IT company, which was also very exciting. It was a wonderful experience and gave me a feel of the corporate environment as well. I was responsible for all the aspects of content marketing, blog posts, social media, internal documentation, some web copy as well, including many other tasks. I got to work with a chief marketing officer who was my boss at the time. We had a department which consisted of a designer, some sales specialists, the HR team, as well as developers who participated in the marketing activities. I got to try a wide variety of different responsibilities. However, after 6 months of work from September to February, I started feeling stagnation. I understood that the tasks became more and more repetitive. Each day felt similar to the previous one. I knew that I have gotten everything I possibly could out of this project, and it felt like it was time to move on. It was funny that at that time, my boss did not want to let me go. He invested a lot of time in training me, which I'm very grateful for. And we were able, after these 6 months, we were able to fully understand each other and match our expectations. At the same time, he understood my situation and we ended the partnership on good terms. And after that experience, I understood that I want to move away from working for someone. And at this point, my interest for business started to dominate. And I stopped looking for vacancies in corporate jobs. Instead, I began to explore the field of business. And it was that time when I started posting daily content on LinkedIn, building my personal brand and expanding my network, which became a habit that continues to this day. I have written more than 700 consecutive posts on the platform. And since then, I have worked with many interesting founders and CEOs, offering personal branding and content marketing services, as well as a couple of other projects parallel to that. For example, I'm currently managing a cybersecurity community with over 60,000 subscribers. And I'm also entering a chief marketing officer role at an edtech startup. Also, an interesting story, I was invited to that startup by my high school teacher, and we are building the project together at the moment. Currently, I'm also a university student in my first year of college in New York City. And right now, I'm in the process of experimenting and touching different ideas with a few agency, software, and marketplace concepts in mind, with the bigger goal of finding that one or multiple ideas that can transform into a financially sustainable business and also become a long-term project, which I hope to build and set up prior to my graduation from university.
Awesome. Yeah, great intro. Really interesting how you transitioned into more of that content marketing role and now you're focusing on the entrepreneurial side. I'm curious, how did your background in journalism impact your content marketing abilities and just your general approach to marketing?
Yeah, that is a great question. That was my first job in my whole life, which was significant. It was a big experience for me. And in terms of the effect of journalism on content marketing, I would say that it follows similar goals and targets, meaning that I got to experience the powers of hooks and winning attention with journalism, meaning that we were looking for the traffic to our articles, and the same kind of concept applies to content marketing. The background in journalism gave me a head start into understanding the techniques needed for marketing, specifically for content marketing, of course. I learned more about search engine optimization. Again, like I mentioned, I worked with WordPress, Google Trends, so I was already getting a feel of marketing the content for the newspaper. And of course, some other useful side skills include formatting text, doing research for the content, copywriting, and similar responsibilities that I had when I began working in the marketing field. And of course, other skills like quick content creation on the trending searches. So if someone is looking for a specific topic at this moment, you need to make an article as fast as possible while it is fresh, which also directly applies to content marketing. It was also a nice pilot project for me before entering the wider marketing space and getting closer to the business side. I understood some basic terms, the foundation, for example, the target audience, tone of voice, what it means to follow the guidelines of a company, or in this case, a newspaper. It was overall a very good foundation for me to understand what it is like to market a product. In this case, it was the newspaper content. And it was very nice to overall get that experience of working with someone and having responsibilities, having a manager, having deadlines, and just following the work style of a big company.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you've worked with startups, corporations, and you're now working on your own venture. What are the biggest differences in marketing strategies between all these environments?
I would say that each of the verticals you mentioned requires their own custom approach to marketing, meaning that one of the main differences I have seen from my experience is the amount of steps required in order to make a decision or take an action. For instance, in larger companies, there is many levels, there is a hierarchy of different people, and it takes some time to approve the ideas you might have. In the startup field, for instance, I'm currently working with a co-founder. We just bounce each other ideas off each other, and it is much more flexible to implement your thoughts into reality. And of course, for all ventures like one person businesses, you can easily integrate what you want and quickly implement your ideas. And as well, another difference across these environments would be that corporations, from my experience, have certain policies and guidelines in place that have to be followed. Again, in the startup and the business field, it is more flexible. There is not that much documentation, and there is not that much to be in compliance with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the classic differences
Yeah.
between giant companies and startups. There's so much more red tape at the big companies. I've personally seen that as well. So you've posted on LinkedIn daily for 700 days consecutively. What have been the biggest lessons that you've learned from this consistency?
Yeah, consistency is a big part of the process. This was my big lesson here. It is essentially the key to unlocking results. I have felt the famous snowball effect happening to me with LinkedIn after some time of putting in the reps, as many people call them. It is getting easier to generate results. In the beginning, the output might not be the best, but once you hit a certain point those opportunities start coming to you and you really understand what all of that hard work was for. And again, consistency helps you to stay top of mind, which is a big part of marketing and personal branding as well, meaning that people hear or see your name on a regular basis and they're not able to forget you. You're always top of mind for them and they always think about you when they open LinkedIn or any other platform where you post content daily. And that is a way to interact with multiple people at once. For instance, in person, it is quite difficult to meet the amount of people you can reach online these days. And that is a big leverage to use when posting content, especially for personal branding. Daily content is equivalent to having small talks with all these people at once, meaning that you can publish one post and 100 people, 1,000 people, or 1 million people can see it. And the content works for you even when you don't work. So you can be doing some other projects, you can be busy, you can be sleeping, you can be traveling. The content is online, the content is published, and the content is doing the work. And if you multiply that content with consistency, it really becomes a huge leverage that you can use to your advantage. And also, content is a good way for people to have a reason to think about you, to remember your name. A big factor is that content is the icebreaker, meaning that in my case, I have had many conversations that started with my content. Some people ask me a question about my content, or they just like the posts I had, they resonate with the thoughts, with the ideas, and they start reaching out. So content is really a way to give people incentive to start talking to you and to approach you first, instead of you having to wait for these people to come to you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what strategies have worked best for growing that LinkedIn audience, and what mistakes should others avoid?
Yeah, great question again. For me, the biggest part of being on LinkedIn is treating it like a personal blog or even like a public diary, meaning that all of the posts I have written, which is now over 700 posts, are written from the heart and soul, as I like to say. I have not used any other tools or AI or any other text generation resources, meaning that I share my own thoughts, my ideas, my realizations, some of my experience, some of my life lessons as well. And another thing I understood is long-term consistency requires great planning. And for that, one of the resources I leverage every day is a content plan, which is for me set up in Notion. And it is really important to have that content management space if you're looking for long-term impact, meaning that it is like a system where you store ideas, you have always some thoughts that you can use, and it helps to write content more efficiently, meaning that you don't have to write from blank. You always have a storage of ideas, and you can also visualize. For me, the content plan is set up in a calendar format. I can visualize, I can see when each post is coming out, how far ahead I have the content planned, and also the status of each post, which has been published, which has been written, which has been scheduled on LinkedIn. That is a big part of the process, having that system in place, which helps to optimize the whole process for the long term. One of the mistakes, or maybe not a mistake, but a common trend I see nowadays is people aiming to automate the process as much as possible, more so to the point that it becomes too much in some cases, meaning that you can sense the lack of that personal part of the personal branding term. And for me, it is important to stay authentic and to remain myself in the content, not fully relying too much on automation and making it obvious that it is not my content.
I want to drill into that for a second. How can you walk me through, like, in a more detailed way, how that content management process works? Will you just have a note where you jot down ideas and maybe have some kind of like a tag that you attach to them? Like, what does that system actually look like for you?
Yeah, very nice question. I would be happy to answer. I have my content plan set up in Notion, like I mentioned, and the format I like to use is very simple. Again, I tried many different templates when I was just starting out, but I ended up building my own system for myself, which is quite minimalistic, but that is why I think it works very well. It is set up in the calendar format, and each day has its own box. And whenever I get an idea for a potential post, it can be just a hook or just the first two lines. I write it down in the content plan. And like I said, one day is one box. So I just put the idea for a certain date. And for instance, right now, It might sound quite incredible, and even to myself, it is difficult to comprehend, but I have ideas for the year ahead. So technically, if I sat down and wrote out all of my ideas into complete posts, I will have content scheduled for the whole year ahead until this time in 2026. And that just comes from keeping those ideas and recording them before you forget them. And answering your question again, for each idea, I have a status box, which Notion allows you to set up, meaning that if I just got the idea and I wrote the first two lines, to not forget my thought, I put the idea status next to it. When I get a chance, I sit down and turn it into a full post, meaning that I expand on my thought and I expand on my initial idea. And that is when I put the written status in a different color to that box with that post. And again, another session for me is scheduling the post on LinkedIn, meaning that when I have written a few posts, maybe a few weeks of content, or even like a month of content ahead, I just sit down and all I do is schedule these posts on the platform, meaning that I have a pipeline of these posts coming out on LinkedIn. And after that is done, I put the scheduled tag on the post. And when the post goes live, the tag changes to published, meaning that I can see how many posts have been published and also which posts are scheduled, how many days in advance I have the content planned. And again, the useful part about this is that on LinkedIn, you can't see the number of posts. I keep a track of the number of posts. So that is how I know that I'm currently at 700 posts and over. LinkedIn does not allow you to see those numbers. And also, the content plan helps you to really own your content, meaning that we all know the dangers of social media, that you can easily lose access to your account. And many people are advocating to build your own newsletters and to diversify your platforms. Content plan is a way to have ownership over your content and actually have all the posts stored as a backup. And even if something happens to your LinkedIn account or any other platform, you can still have all of that content to yourself and you can technically reuse it or recycle it, and you just have access to all your posts. It is now like a history book for me. I can go back in time. I can go to my first post. I can see what I posted a year ago. I can see what I posted last week if I need to reference a certain thought. And I just find it to be a very nice way to organize content.
I like that. I think I'm going to adopt that system as well. It sounds like you said a good way to have your own ownership rather than doing it all in the app. So, yeah, really great answer. You're building your own agency, working as a CMO. How do you balance multiple projects at once?
Yeah, that is a big part of the process. The balance is key. And the big part here is dedicating time to each one, which involves some juggling at times, especially if you want to dedicate an equal amount of time to each project. Some people say that multitasking is the enemy of efficiency, but at the same time, I understand that claim. People say that it makes you have a blurred focus and you lose track of all the things and you're not able to fully dedicate your attention to a certain project. On the other hand, from my point of view, multiple projects is a way to diversify, and maintaining balance is a skill that can be built. The benefits of that diversification is clear. For example, the simple one is multiple revenue streams. And of course, for me as a student, more experience options, meaning that I get to try different things and widening my horizons is a big part of it. To answer your question, the way I balance multiple projects, it's through recurring activities that take place regularly, meaning that I don't just spend time working on one project and not thinking about the other at all. I try to have regular activities. These could be meetings with my co-founder or writing slots for my LinkedIn, blocks of time for strategy if I want to plan a new project. And the main thing is for them to happen with certain repetition. And that means consistency again, since you should not forget about each of the projects, and the ideal situation is that you spend an equal amount of time on each of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I too am a multitasker. I think it matters how your brain works as well. I think some people are better at just focusing on one thing and really mastering it, and I think others might be better suited for working on a couple of things so you can switch between subject areas, and that's a little bit more exciting. That's certainly the case for myself, and it's worked out well. There always has to be certain priorities, but yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's most important just know how you personally work and basically build your schedule around that.
Just to add on to this, I also feel like this approach helped me to understand and reveal what I actually enjoy working on. Meaning that if I have multiple projects and I clearly put one of them off for a later time, and I prefer to work on the other one and really shows the thing I enjoy more. And having that experiment with yourself, just having multiple projects and seeing which one you actually want to work on more can lead you in the direction of what you should actually do in the future, what you enjoy most.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Especially if you're young. There's no reason not to try a lot of different things and just see what sticks. That's the only way to figure out what you're passionate about. You can't just do it in theory. You have to actually dive in and try a lot of things. So that's really great that you're doing that. And definitely anybody else that's anywhere near where you're at in terms of age should be doing the same thing. Many marketers struggle with personal branding. So, what are your key principles for standing out in a crowded space?
Yeah, this is a big part of the process as well. Even many of my friends and colleagues have asked me when they see my LinkedIn profile, they see my daily content, and they see the personal brand I'm building. The question I get the most is, what do you write about? Where do you get these ideas from? And for me, I call it this content creator mindset, which just makes you see ideas in your daily life. For instance, I can talk to some people, I get ideas for content. I can just observe nature and get some inspiration. I can be on a walk. I can be in some interesting places that don't usually associate with working, but I can still get that content idea. And the main thing is to, like I said earlier, record it in the content plan. With that being said, I feel lack of content ideas is not a real issue, and it is more of an excuse at sometimes for some people. Because for me, content ideas are thoughts, experiences, and life lessons. And I know that everybody, for a fact, has all of the above in their biography. And it is just a matter of the challenge I see many people face with personal branding is extracting these ideas from their mind and actually turning them into content. Because again, many people have their own self-imposed restrictions that my thoughts are too simple, I don't have enough experience. But again, for someone out there in the whole world, your thoughts are valuable. And even if you find it simple or silly or not experienced, it is still a good resource for content. And I believe that, with that being said, any person is entitled and able to create content. And the big part is just understanding the abundance of ideas you have inside of you. Again, another part is it happened to me as well before I started posting content. Many people are afraid that social media will make them more vulnerable. And I had the same situation happen to me. A way to work around that I find is to identify a comfortable format for yourself. For instance, you don't have to become an influencer and post pictures of your breakfast or every second of your day on camera, but instead, for instance, the method I follow is text only content on LinkedIn. And that is also a perfect example of personal branding. It has equal potential to any other format of personal branding. And if that is comfortable for you, if you enjoy writing, which happened to me, that is the best format. Again, the main thing to stay consistent in the long term and to stand out is to be comfortable with what you do. And if you're comfortable, if you found your method, the way that works for you, you can really stay consistent in the long run.
Yeah, I like that. One thing I'll add that I'm curious your perspective on, if you're balancing a corporate job with posting publicly on LinkedIn and you're posting things that you learned, the things that you learned are probably related to the work that you're doing or somewhere in that area. And you might be opinionated, you might have an opinion on something that others disagree with, and the people that you work with will see those posts and probably relate them to the experiences they had with you, or your might see it as a window into your experiences at the company. So there's a little bit of a challenge there where it might seem like you're almost subtweeting or you're publicly posting things that are really more private to the work that you're doing and shouldn't necessarily be posted. And what you're posting should probably be more related to things you're learning from outside projects that are unrelated to maybe the politics at work or the individuals that you're learning from at work. What's your take on that? Like isolating the posts to not be related to maybe your professional job and company and rather just focusing on insights that are related to outside activities.
Yeah, I have heard about this challenge from so many people. Like you said, it is very common for the colleagues who work in the corporate field, and many people don't choose to post on LinkedIn for or any other platform for the reason of being perhaps judged or overlooked by their colleagues, and also for making them vulnerable to the company and the other people they work with. Again, my take on this would be that anyone really has the right to have their own personal blog, and a personal brand can really be as simple as just posting your own thoughts and experiences. Again, you can start by making the content more abstract in a way, meaning that you don't have to talk directly about your work. You can really just focus on your own experiences and some thoughts, some observations. Again, of course, it is important to follow the guidelines of a company and not disclose some certain things. If you have an NDA, for example, that is very crucial. But again, you are fully able to share your own thoughts and to reflect on your experiences. And I think that is really the core of personal branding. Again, I see on LinkedIn and any other platform that authenticity is the key to get attention. And perhaps with that being said, a personal brand that talks about personal experiences and life lessons can be even more insightful than the one that talks about work or some internal processes. Essentially, you don't have to even touch on these things if you're working a corporate job, or if you feel like that will hurt your occupation. You can start by sharing your personal thoughts, experiences, and life lessons, and that is a good base to begin with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, how do you measure success for content beyond just likes and engagement?
Yeah, that is also a very important question for people working in the content marketing field. I think that likes and engagement, as many of us know, are also known as the vanity metrics, and they are essentially just a cover image or like a packaging shiny element of the product. Again, they're an excellent first impression, but they don't always reveal the bigger picture, and that is why it is important to measure the success of the content beyond just likes and engagement. Actually, I recently had a post on my LinkedIn profile with a hook that said the number of followers means nothing except this one thing, and that one thing was first impression. And the example I used is that I saw this one account with 45,000 followers, but they only get 6 to 20 likes on their posts. Again, not a very obvious proportion to such a large audience, and it undermines the value of a big follower base from one perspective. But at the same time, likes also do not tell the full story to us as the viewer, meaning that even with a small amount of likes, in this case, if we are taking this example as a case study, they can still be doing great with small engagement. And perhaps this can signify that their content is more optimized for the target audience and not a larger mass of people. And again, maybe they're not following the strategy of going viral, and instead they're focusing on their own services. And with that being said, I like to measure the impact of content and other digital activities through the raw returns for the person or a group of people that do them. That can be a company as well. If it is a personal blog, these measurements can include the community you built, the audience you have, the actual tangible opportunities that came from a personal brand, and even your own personal feelings, how you feel about the work you're doing, whether or not you're satisfied with the results, and just the overall impression of putting in that work into the content and the personal brand. Of course, a common statement says that the numbers don't lie, but again, the vanity metrics that I mentioned are tricky in of themselves. They really have the power to make a positive or a negative first impression, but again, like I said, they don't always have a super accurate depiction of the larger context.
Yeah, totally agreed. So, what are some underrated marketing tactics that have worked well for you?
Yeah, that is another awesome question. The current buzzword is artificial intelligence that many people are familiar with by now, of course. And everyone, especially in the marketing space, is striving for super high level automation and optimization. again, don't get me wrong, I'm not against using AI. AI is a great tool and I use it myself as well. It is a big part of marketing nowadays, especially. But with that being said, an underrated strategy which I found quite useful, and recently it was just a normality, but now it becomes a really underrated approach, is to remain human and maintain those natural, unautomized relationships. For instance, I have written more than 700 posts on LinkedIn, and I have not used AI for any of them. I was writing purely from my heart and soul, like I said earlier. And again, AI is a great tool and a catalyst for progress. And I heard many different business owners say that if you don't use AI, you will fall behind, which is true to an extent. But at the same time, remaining human in spaces where it makes sense and matters, such as your own personal blog or your personal brand, is really an underrated strategy nowadays with so much automation and optimization taking place in the online space. And again, that is the way to help you stand out among a large group of people which are focused on following the same trend. And here, a big part is really connected to my earlier career as well. An underrated approach, which is maybe cliche at this point, but it is still true. And I think it will be true for a long time, is to start early. And again, the earlier, the better by all means. And we know the saying that it is never too late to start, but the earlier is preferable. And here, from my experience again, of beginning to work early in high school, still being in grade 9, the main part was to shift away from the textbook. And for example, I was working when no one at my age was doing these things. And the big part of it is starting early, which helped me to be ahead of the curve by this time. And again, gain some valuable experience that some people are only starting to explore now. And while these things have been done early on, citing one of my LinkedIn posts from fall of 2024, doing what others are not is a cheat code. It is like taking a left lane while everyone is driving in the right one, meaning that doing less of what everyone is doing and doing more of what no one is doing is really a big underrated strategy to progress at a faster rate. And I see that many people try to follow the norms and standards. And also, especially in my surroundings, I hear the factor of age being used as a way to postpone the start of something. For example, I'm too young or I'm not good enough. I don't have that much experience. But those are self imposed restrictions which really limit your opportunities and make it more difficult to stand out. In summary, I would say that leaning away from the majority is a big concept. And again, going back to AI, not jumping on the trends that everybody else is following. Again, it is good to use these tools to your advantage, but having that authenticity really helps you to stay true to yourself and not get over influenced by the surroundings and the environment that is taking place around you. And again, having that intentional direction in which you want to grow and develop and following that path early on is really the way to stand out in the long term.
Yeah, totally agreed. So you've worked with both technical and non-technical founders. What advice do you have for bridging the gap between marketing and tech teams?
Yes, the two main lessons I can provide in regards to this question would be first to make the tech people understand the value of participating in marketing activities. And a good example here is to use personal branding and all the benefits that it brings. The second lesson is crafting marketing activities, especially in companies. I have had that experience happen, crafting activities that actually relate to the experience of the people you want to involve, meaning that for tech people, it should be something they're interested in to participate and take part. For instance, in my experience with the IT company, we had a rubric for the corporate blog, and I was interviewing developers and architects as well as other employees from the tech department to get their commentary on various news or global events, or even some projects they're working on, some insights for the potential clients. And they gave us feedback and they found it relevant and were happy to share those insights, which means that these marketing activities did not feel uncomfortable for them. And the big part here is what often happens. Marketing departments force the tech people to participate in marketing activities that feel strange, that feel weird or unusual. And the main goal, to answer your question, bridging that gap, is to highlight the value and, of course, to make those marketing related activities comfortable and interesting and relatable to the people that you want to involve.
That makes sense. What's the process that you use for identifying new business opportunities and deciding which ones to pursue?
Yes, that is a big part of the process, especially with so many different and interesting experiences that can be accessed nowadays. For me, it was always good to know my direction. And after a couple of not so positive work experiences, which have happened in the past as well, I sat down and I wrote specific criteria of what I'm looking for in the project. Again, it is not only about matching the requirements of the employer if you're talking about the corporate environment, it is also knowing what you want to see in those projects. And again, it is crucial to be ready to reject those projects that are not a good fit and to say no. Again, I look at projects and different opportunities from different sides. The first factor that always comes up is the interest. How much will I learn? How much will I enjoy the work? And how will it affect my progress, skills, and personal development overall? The second aspect is the return on time, which means that the question I have when looking at a new business opportunity is what do I get in return for spending my time on that project? And it really needs to have an incentive for me to devote my time. Again, time is a very valuable resource, and it is important to be able to say no in some cases when you don't feel like it is the right thing. Here, it is also important to mention that appealing to compensation is not always in the financial field. Sometimes a compensation can be in other formats, experiences, or even some connections that are not monetary. So, meaning that the compensation from a project can be not only in the format of money. And again, I made a rule for myself from early on not to work for free, but in some cases, such a model of working for free can be worth trying. And especially for people who are just starting out in the field, getting some experience and getting something on your resume, getting something you can talk about in job interviews is a big part. Sometimes it is needed to work for free to gain the experience. And another part I want to mention here is that personally I have a small weakness and a tendency to say yes to many things and having a difficulty of saying no. And perhaps the factor here is being young and active, that at this age, I want to get my hands on as many experiences as possible. And I usually try to grab as many opportunities as I can just to diversify my experience, to build my portfolio, to expand my horizons. And again, that is important to stay open-minded, but at the same time, filtering those opportunities and being able to say no from time to time is key. Nonetheless, I try to stay open to my options. And again, based on the diversity of projects I'm currently working on, I enjoy trying different things. And the main part to answer your question is just understand what you want, have a direction, and be able to say no if you feel like that project is not needed for you.
Have you faced skepticism due to your age in the business world, and how have you overcome it?
Yeah, that is also an interesting question. There have been a few times when age became an issue, but most of the time, surprisingly to me, companies did not ask for age that much. Again, the main part is the qualifications you have, the experience you have, what you bring to the table, and possibly the age was not a big part of the process due to the freelance work style that I was following and perhaps in some cases less official partnerships with companies, meaning that I was working on part-time projects and just completing certain tasks for smaller companies. Once an interesting story, I got an age-related concern in my DMs. I was reaching out to one founder with some personal branding offerings, and he said, to quote, "I think you're too young to be advising CEOs about LinkedIn and such." And it was interesting to see that here age became an issue, but at the same time, he was very friendly. He gave me advice and he offered some coaching for me as well, meaning that the age did become an issue, but at the same time, it also served as a benefit for some greater opportunities and some support from a person who had more experience in the field and was more involved for a longer time. Again, I'm not going to lie here. There also have been some instances where I had to slightly adjust reality. And perhaps I was even shy of my age back in the day, especially the high school times, grade 9, grade 10. I was applying to different positions. I remember one summer when I attended more than 100 job interviews in 3 months. And it was not because I was desperate to find any kind of work at any cost. I was actually, like I mentioned earlier, quite selective and did that interview process more for practice. But again, most of the time, even in those job interviews, the age was not the main question. The key impression and the decision to give me the role or not was based on the pitch, the skills, and the experience. Again, if your experience matches the project requirements and you speak well in the interview, your success is nearly guaranteed. And you just have to create your own story, your own system, and practice it many times until you get good at it and you're able to really make a good impression. Like I said, another advice for perhaps the younger generation here is to not set your own self-imposed restrictions. At the time when I was back in grade 9 of high school, I was only around 15, 16 years of age. And many of my peers have used the age as an excuse not to start. But the reality of the modern world is that in the digital space, there is so much to be accessed and everything is more simple than it was before. Nowadays, those opportunities are much more attainable. And it is just a matter of having the desire to get them and doing the work that needs to get done in order for you to have those experiences.
So, what's your vision for your agency and your personal brand over the next 5 years?
Yes, I like that question a lot. Ideally, the thought I had in my mind for a long time now is to build a system that diversifies time and income. What I mean by that is in a day, you only have 24 hours, and that is a limit which you cannot avoid. Again, you will not work the whole day. You have some time for sleeping, you have some time for rest and other activities. So you need to find, in my perspective, a system that really diversifies time and income, meaning that your income is not dependent on the amount of time you spend working. And that comes from a strong system. Currently, I am in the first year of university, and my big ambitious goal that I have set for myself is to build a financially stable business before graduation, which means that I have approximately 4 years to achieve that goal. And if that doesn't happen, one of the few options I would have on the table is to look for a job and go into the corporate environment. But my current preferred career path is to focus more on the business side and try to avoid the corporate environment, although I have nothing against it. And even more than that, being in a city like New York, it is definitely an experience to try working in a big company. In places like Manhattan, it is very inspirational. The main thing here is to be careful about not being soaked in. And we all know the situations when people start the corporate environment career path and they end up working in a routine space for multiple decades. That is the pitfall I'm trying to avoid in my future vision. And again, in my opinion, entrepreneurship is really a more sustainable way to work in the long term, meaning that you can be your own boss, you can be on your own schedule, you can set up your work life balance, you can decide what you like to work on, when you like to work on those things. And currently, I'm in the process of touching different ideas, seeing what works beyond just the agency model. I'm also considering some software and marketplace and matchmaking ideas. Again, for now, these are just concepts in my mind, but the main goal is to find an idea which is first and foremost exciting to work on for me in the long term so that I can be consistent. And of course, the idea should meet my preferences and criteria. It should be scalable, needed by the market, of course, and financially sustainable. Quite a number of things to balance in one company, which is a challenge here. But again, that is the beauty of entrepreneurship and building your own venture. It is not really like a linear path. And right now, there is a lot of experimentation to be done. And that is my vision for the next few years, trying to find that idea or multiple ideas that can be financially sustainable and hopefully building and launching and setting up my own business before graduation so that after I finish college, I have a project to work on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Couple more quick questions before we go. If someone wanted to replicate your success in personal branding and content marketing, what would be the first 3 steps you'd recommend?
Yes, I like that question as well. The first three things that I would say would be to have a plan, to take the first step, and to start early. What I mean by that is it is good to spend some time planning. And again, not too much of theory and more practical experiences, but having that outline of what you want to achieve, having your goals in mind is very good to have as a start. And after you have a plan, or at least a brief understanding of your goals, you can really tailor your actions to these goals. If you have a target in mind, it is easier to work towards that target rather than jumping into action right away and not knowing what you are doing this work for. Again, not too much time on planning, but a certain strategy is a big part of success. And another factor, which is known to be 50% of success, is taking that first step. Again, for me, if you take the LinkedIn example, I made an account in December of 2022, and it took me a few months until I published my first post, and it took me a few months again until I decided to start posting daily content. And that is the time that could be used to grow and to scale. And if I started early, again, that would impact my results even more. So taking that first step and starting early is key to really overtake your competition, to stand out and to be in the lead.
Awesome. And finally, what is your favorite part about working in the marketing industry?
Marketing is a great industry to work in. The biggest and the most attractive part for me is that it is a consistently evolving environment. There's so many different aspects to explore, so many different types of marketing that you can try. And also, I'm a big fan personally of building systems and processes, meaning that I get to enjoy when I'm able to craft a sequence of actions which leads to a certain result. And when you see that you have built an action or a process that generates an output you want to see, it really makes me feel satisfied with the work. And I can see that correlation of inputs and outputs, putting in the work and getting something in return. And that is really a big leverage, which feels very impactful for me. And knowing that doing this one thing will produce the result I want really makes you feel like you're in control. And again, another thing about marketing, which I enjoy, is working with people. There's a lot of social connections. And most importantly, marketing helps you to make a change. And that is the great reward I find for all the hard work in the marketing industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Maxim. I really
Thank,
appreciate your time.
thank you, Alex. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your invitation.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye.